Madoda ndulengentini
zaphele zinkomo esibayeni ziqedwa ibhubesi thumelana amabutho nanto-ke mfana ziphelile izinkomo esibayeni ziqedwa ibhubesi.
Jordan Curtin joins us now live via satellite phone from the Shira Ridge on Mount Kilimanjaro. Jordan, can you hear me?
I sure can. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you doing?
A little bit cold, a little bit tired, but pretty excited and doing excellent out here.
This is the story of 5 people from different walks of life who shared a vision and a dream that many thought to be impossible. In the spring of 2005, the North Shore Disability Resource Center, NSDRC, decided to participate in the Mount Kilimanjaro Climb for Community Living. This decision would forever change the lives of many. The Climb for Community Living was a provincial initiative by the BC Association for Community Living, BCACL, and 16 member associations that support children, youth, and adults with developmental and physical disabilities and their families from across British Columbia. The expedition team consisted of 43 climbers, 19 people with developmental and physical disabilities and our support climbers. The Climb for Community Living project was a public awareness and fundraising project designed to highlight the abilities of people with developmental and physical disabilities, to promote the importance of inclusion in our communities, and to raise funds to support programs and services. The NSDRC team was unique in that it was the only group whose climber, Brock Metcalf, lives with a physical disability. This meant using a TrailRider, a revolutionary, lightweight, adapted wheelchair designed by Sam Sullivan, Vancouver's current mayor, and the BC Mobility Opportunities Society, BC MOS. We used it to push, pull, and lift Brock up the mountain. We climb to prove that anything is possible if people are believed in and are given the opportunity and support required to fulfill their dreams. Brock Metcalf is an amazing 20-year-old man who lives with cerebral palsy. Born and raised on the North Shore, he has always had a taste for adventure and the outdoors. When Brock heard about the opportunity to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, he knew it was something he had to do. Paul Blair was born November 7, 1980, in Vancouver. He grew up on the North Shore playing a plethora of team sports. Paul and Brock have been good friends since they met at Highlands Elementary School and have done such things as skiing, hiking, and attending camps together ever since. Luke Curtin is a 27-year-old, also born and raised on the North Shore. Luke graduated from Carson Graham Secondary School with a love of a variety of team sports and outdoor activities. This adventure seeker caught the trail riding bug while volunteering with the BC MOS hiking program. Andrew Starovatov grew up and went to university in the Ukraine. After obtaining his medical degree, he worked as a doctor in Uganda for 1 year, and then came to Canada with his wife in 2001. He currently works at Vancouver General Hospital as part of the University of British Columbia's cardiology research team. Hiking had been a passion all his life, so he quickly fell in love with our province. I am a 26-year-old lover of nature, adventure, and the human spirit. born and raised in North Vancouver. I am a recreational therapist and have worked in the care industry for the past 5 years. I became very experienced with the TrailRider while working for BC Moss, coordinating their TrailRider hiking program. I was honored and slightly terrified when asked to organize the NSDRC's team to climb Kilimanjaro. But knowing how much I thrived on challenge and how deeply I believed in the vision, the decision was a very easy one to make. One might ask what it took to make this dream a reality. I would like to share with you the story of Brock's team and our incredible journey up Mount Kilimanjaro. Preparing ourselves physically was the name of the game as we readied for our upcoming challenge. By July 2005, we had kicked into full gear, which meant endless hours in the gym, on the road, and in the backcountry as we practiced our skills and put our trail riding abilities to the test. As well as preparing our bodies for the physical challenges, we required many immunizations and all sat nervously while waiting for a long list of injections to be given over and over and over again. As per usual, we laughed and made the best of it. It took creative thought and practice, many man-hours, and a lot of trial and error before the TrailRider was adapted so that Brock was able to sit safely and comfortably. Thanks to the amazing staff at Sunny Hill Health Center for Children, we were successful. The Capilano Dam Trail was the most frequent training hike, and despite the sometimes grueling North Shore weather, we persevered, laughing and joking to keep our spirits high. The first major camping destination was Manning Park, where we met and had a chance to get to know the other Climb for Community Living members prior to the big trip. There was great excitement as we came to a bridge where a slippery, decaying log spanned the two sides of the creek in front of us. People were busy shouting their opinions on how to safely get Brock across the creek, when my partner and I simply looked at the water with a smile and began rolling up our pant legs. The Garibaldi training adventure was at the end of September, so the weather had become quite cold. This was a valuable exercise as it gave us a small taste of what glacial camping might truly be like. Another key preparation that consumed much of our time was fundraising. Many wonderful people in the community donated their time and energy to help us raise the funds necessary to send our group to Africa. Local businesses showed their generosity through product donations to support the dream, and for that the team is forever thankful. Brock worked closely with me to coordinate his preparation for the trip. Together we created a new care regime that would allow him to climb and camp in comfort. One of the biggest challenges was finding a doctor who would risk liability and approve Brock's health status before the trip. Research on people living with cerebral palsy in high altitude is seriously lacking. Brock's story may now be the most current research in this field. After so many months of preparation, it was surreal to be finally leaving for Africa. On the morning of February 7th, 2006, we hugged and kissed our families and supporters farewell, finished final media interviews, and were rushed off to board the plane. The 24 hours in transit and 11-hour time difference was grueling. Brock was in pretty rough shape by the time we arrived in Tanzania, but as usual, he made a quick comeback. Only one day of rest allowed our slightly dazed and confused team to sleep off severe jet lag. Culture shock was immediate and intense. We were saddened and overwhelmed as we observed the beautiful faces of the Tanzanian people, most of whom were living in immense poverty. Something we did share was humor. We laughed and joked with the other teams as we prepared for the next day's intensity. We couldn't help but shake our heads thinking, we are really going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? We awoke on day one of the climb, groggy-eyed, nervous, and more excited than ever before. The day had finally arrived, and stomachs churned as we assembled the TrailRider and did a final check of supplies. The thought crossed my mind that if anything was missing, it was entirely my fault. I laugh now, looking back, thinking how in many ways we were actually over-prepared. A group of 5 porters were assigned to assist the NSDRC team and to help carry our gear. We struggled to communicate the technicalities of the TrailRider through thick language barriers and were concerned to discover they seemed to be somewhat misinformed. We found we had to be very assertive so that the porters didn't simply take over and do everything themselves. That evening, we arrived at the first camp and took in the sights, smells, and sounds that would be our reality for the next 9 days. We hiked out of the rainforest into never-ending narrow trails and rolling landscape, filled with sharp brush and huge boulders that had to be climbed over. It was a rush running alongside the TrailRider, each step an unknown, anxious about tripping or breaking an ankle. Adjusting to the outstanding treatment by the guides took some time. It seemed almost excessive in sad comparison to the hundreds of porters that were given very little of anything. We would shake our heads at times to find a 20-foot table filled with food and flowers in the middle of nowhere. It was heartbreaking to see the men who had been by our side all day, sitting huddled together, waiting for what was left. We began stockpiling food for the porters so they were strong and healthy, and to show our appreciation for their monumental efforts. While climbing with the African people, it became very clear that we could not have made it without them. We witnessed them persevere with superhuman strength when we struggled to even move. We heard their inspirational and heartfelt chants, which lifted our spirits and brought tears to our eyes. It was then that we realized the significance of climbing with the Tanzanian porters, as they too were living with their own disability, poverty. We climbed together, different in so many ways, but so much the same. Humor was our best friend. I will never forget the moment we arrived at the Barranco Wall. It towered over us, its steep, jagged cliffs seemingly impossible for the TrailRider to climb. We were very relieved as more and more porters came to help. One of the most powerful sights of the adventure was watching nearly 40 porters work tirelessly and seamlessly to get Brock up and over the wall. Using a complex system of ropes, it took brute strength and almost 2 hours before they were able to push, pull, and lift Brock up and over the wall. Altitude is not a force to be reckoned with. Frustration soared as the higher we climbed, the more useless we felt we had become. It was challenging enough to put one foot in front of the other, let alone pushing, pulling, or lifting another person's weight. All the training in the world will not prepare you for an altitude this extreme. One never knows how your body will respond till you get there. The higher the elevation, the colder it became. Mornings were particularly challenging, as often hands wouldn't cooperate and bodies became hypoxic from elevation. Symptoms of hypoxia can range from headaches, nausea and dizziness, to a complete loss of motor skills and consciousness. The clouds would rush in and swallow us whole. We could feel the cold, moist air on our faces. It seemed like forever since we had seen bright, live vegetation when we came across some very interesting species that seemed almost alien. There were a few images that will never be forgotten. The TrailRider track that made its way through so many different terrains will be there forever, like the first footsteps on the moon. Many will ask themselves what on earth made that mark in such high altitude. The funky outhouse, sitting in contrasting beauty against the breathtaking surroundings. Who built it? And how did they ever manage to get their materials to this remote location? Patriotism filled our veins as we grinned at the Canadian flag sticker on the TrailRider. It had taken such a beating against cliff, root, and slate. A teepee sat with a past of purpose, a bit eerie as you could almost hear the chanting that might have echoed from its walls. We awoke on day 7 to startling news that it would be our team's last day of the ascent. We were worried about Brock's safety at that extreme altitude. The goal was to summit, and nerves ran high as we began the torturous journey up to the peak of Kilimanjaro. We looked at each other and attempted to smile as we fought for our bodies to function with half the oxygen we are used to. Our heads pounded. Brock began to fade and his speech slurred. We had finally reached Stella Point at 19,000 feet on February 16th, 7 days after setting out on our adventure. A moment frozen in time that none of us will forget was when we realized we had no choice but to turn back. The summit of Uhuru Peak was an hour away and within our sights, but we knew we had no choice. Brock looked up at us with strained eyes and said, "I'm too high." We made the decision to descend as a team. We had trained together, traveled together, and climbed together to this point. We would go down together. We kissed, we hugged, we cried. Despite being 340 feet short of Uhuru Point on Kilimanjaro, our team made history when Brock became the first person in a TrailRider to reach Stella Point at 19,000 feet. We reflected on the fact that maybe we had paved the way for the next team using a TrailRider. Perhaps they would reach Uhuru Point and break our record. What a rush it was sliding downhill at what felt like 100 miles an hour, kicking up a cloud of dust that engulfed us and made its way into our eyes, ears, and mouths. Brock's health had faded. We took turns attempting to catch his vomit while running full speed ahead to reach lower altitude where he could recover. We arrived at Millennium Camp at dusk, and later, full of warm soup and pasta, we climbed into bed and slept the soundest sleep we ever had or ever will again. On day 8, we cheered the other teams as they arrived safely back at the camp, all with incredible stories of reaching the summit. One couldn't help but to feel Kilimanjaro peering proudly down at us as we sat shaken from her wrath. Screams of joy and laughter echoed as Brock was presented with his first Coca-Cola. We sighed, we giggled. Brock was fine. Brock was back in action. Full of piss and vinegar, we jumped out of bed ready to complete the 9th and final day of the journey. It felt so good to have oxygen in our lungs. The porters were pleasantly surprised to see us take over the TrailRider and run much of the final 4 hours down the mountain. We were greeted at the final leg of our journey by a large group of locals singing and banging drums. I have to admit, I was crying once again. Smiling and happy, we searched for the nearest place to collapse and the coldest beer we could find. We did it! As a group of 47 climbers, we all summited in our own way. Most importantly, we had proven to ourselves and the world that anything is possible if you truly believe. It was time to celebrate, and celebrate we did.
Kilimanjaro, hakuna matata. Jambo bwana, habari gani?
How many beautiful people does it take to move a mountain? Oh my God. Oh my God. Look at this. Literally climbing a mountain. A sea of people.
Everlasting